So Republicans are desperately trying to sell their horrific plan, which extends and worsens all of the bad aspects of Obamacare and viciously attacks all of the good aspects of it. And they're really in bad shape because you have the Rand Paul people, the people that think that, there should be some version of the Hunger Games for kids to get inhalers. And then you have people, not just so-called moderates, but even a guy like Tom Cotton, who is a radical far-right extremist, but does have a state that even its Republican governor, who is well on the right, does not want to have the same level of Medicaid cuts that this bill is proposing. Tom Cotton is interesting because he represents, a Trump state in many ways in Arkansas. And he was an early adapter to the Trump message. He's always been a far-right, Iran fearmonger and warmonger. But he saw an opening on xenophobia and immigration, but also responded rhetorically to concerns on things like inequality in the economy. So he's come out very aggressively against the current Republican bill in the House, the Ryan bill. Here he is talking with George Stephanopoulos this weekend.
Right now by Senator Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas. Senator Cotton, thank you for joining us this morning. I know you were listening to Director Mulvaney right there. He says this is just a framework. This is the framework for repeal and replace. You're going to have the chance to fix it in the Senate. Can this bill be fixed?
George, the bill probably can be fixed, but it's going to take a lot of carpentry on that framework. As it's written today, this bill in the House of Representatives cannot pass the Senate, and I believe it would have adverse consequences for millions of Americans, and it wouldn't deliver on our promises to reduce the cost of health insurance for Americans. So I would say to my friends in the House of Representatives with whom I serve, do not walk the plank and vote for a bill that cannot pass the Senate and then have to face the consequences of that vote. George, you were in the White House in 1993. You remember when House Democrats voted for a BTU energy tax. Not only did that not become law, it didn't even get a vote in the Senate. And many of those Democrats lost their next election because they voted on that tax.
So you're
they call
saying
it getting BTU'd. I just do not think that this bill can pass the Senate, and therefore I think the House should take a pause and try to get as close as we can to a good result before they send it to the Senate.
So you're saying House Republicans, if they vote for this bill, are going to pay the price without getting any benefit?
I'm afraid that if they vote for this bill, they're going to put the House majority at risk next year. And we have majorities in the House and the Senate and the White House, not only to repeal Obamacare and get health care reform right, but to reform our taxes and our regulations and build up our military and accomplish many other things. And I don't want to see the House majority put at risk on a bill that is not going to pass the Senate. That's why I think we should take a pause, try to solve as many of the problems on both Medicaid and the individual insurance market in this bill in the House, and then allow the Senate to take its work up.
So that's striking, and I think that this is someone who represents a state that clearly will get hit very badly by the bills that's currently constituted, and someone who in a Republican environment has read the winds correctly. Now we have Tom Price, who is a partner in the House with Paul Ryan, as Michael Shore pointed out with me last week. There's a reason he's at Health and Human Services. This is a sign of the Trump administration basically turning things like gutting the social safety net over to the Republican House agenda. And it's fascinating to me because we'll get to Ryan in a second, but we saw Mulvaney at OMB. He's out spinning that it's not necessarily, the point of healthcare is not necessarily to get people healthcare coverage, arguing that there might be healthcare benefits, which of course would actually be in terms of increased employment, which in some cases, in fact, people taking on second jobs just to afford healthcare, that great progressive step forward. But this is Tom Price speaking with Chuck Todd, saying something that is just Trumpian in its basic untruth.
This bill is passed, nobody will be.
Chuck Todd and Tom Price from this past weekend.
Can you say for certain that once this bill is passed, nobody will be worse off financially when it comes to paying for health care?
Well, I'll tell you right now, there are a lot of people that are worse off right now when they're paying for health care, and they aren't getting the care that they need. Again, the premiums are up and deductibles are up. If you're an individual out there making $50,000, $60,000 and your deductible is $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, you may have that insurance card, but you don't have coverage. And I hear from my former colleagues all the time about patients who come into their office and they recommend something for them and they're not able to get it because the deductible is so high.
But I notice you ducked the aspect of whether you can guarantee that nobody will be worse off financially.
I firmly believe that nobody will be worse off financially in the process that we're going through, understanding that they'll have choices that they can select the kind of coverage that they want for themselves and for their family, not that government forces them to buy.
So, of course, the last thing he's referring to is relaxing restrictions so that there can be completely worthless health insurance plans. That's the type of thing he's talking about, things that don't really cover anything and will not be there for you in emergency. Then I guess, actually narrowly speaking, you might say that people will be potentially better off financially because they'll just give up because the subsidies are so radically reduced and they won't spend a much smaller part of their immediate income to get health care. Of course, they'll pay for it later if they have an emergency. And undoubtedly, people who are dealing with Medicaid are going to be in a much worse situation.
Hey folks, Sam Seder here. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses. And one way he can is by you subscribing to this channel. I don't know how that works.